Thank you everyone for joining this webinar on the topic of getting innovation capital into the IT budget. A very timely topic, hopefully, for those of you working on budgets this time of year. First question, I guess, is why should you listen to me? I don't want to make this a conversation about Innovation Vista or a commercial for us, but this is really what we do all day, every day. We focus on IT strategy and leadership, everything from filling that role, providing those services to companies who don't have an IT leader, or providing support for companies who do have an IT leader. And as noted here, several flexible options relative to that. So certainly interested to talk later if anyone is interested to explore that. But again, this session is not going to be about Innovation Vista. It's us sharing with you some ideas for your own budgeting process. But hopefully this gives you a sense, just with our scope and experience, that we've done some of this. We've had some experience and success. So hopefully what we have is at least good food for thought for those of you working through this for your own organizations. So let me first start with some common budgeting mistakes and bad assumptions. So they're really from both sides. On the IT side, we are guilty, as well as business leaders, of some bad assumptions. I've just listed a few here. The first, I think, is the most prevalent, being measured on cost control, right? A very common thing. CFOs in particular, apply this metric and want to see a comparison. It is a bad assumption to assume that's all the business thinks about. There are a lot of other things in the minds of business executives that are more interesting than this. So wanted to call that out. On the business exec side, there's also a similar parallel mistaken thought process that IT people just like to spend money. We like to do cool things, fun things, play with new toys, whatever form that view comes. That's a bad assumption. I'm sure there are IT leaders out there that think that way, but by and large, that's not the case at all. And I think generally people are all about doing what has the most impact for their company. Outside of lights on, only really projects that get sponsored by the business or started and initiated by the business will probably be approved. That's another faulty assumption. It commonly happens. And part of what I want to do in this webinar is call out some of these common mistakes and the thought process that leads to them, and get you thinking on a little bit wider view of what IT can be and how to get that seat at the table. I also want to mention, I do have the Q&A window open. Please feel free, any of you who have a question, if it makes sense on the slide that we're talking about, I'll address it right away. And if it's a more generic question, I may hold it till the end, but I do have space at the end of this for Q&A. So please feel free. I want you to get some good value from this session. On the business exec side, they think that we're focused on the lights on and the IT view of the world, and that if business leaders don't bring things to IT, they probably would never be proposed. So also a faulty assumption, by and large, if you're painting with a broad brush. And so again, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about in this will lead to behaviors and hopefully break down these bad assumptions on whichever side of the aisle that they're occurring. IT often treated, and we see ourselves too often, as just an enabling back office function. Certainly has been that since the 70s and 80s. Not a lot of impact on business models, et cetera, until recent years outside of technology companies. Of course, that is changing, and it's changing quickly and dramatically. So I want everyone to sort of align with the trends and what's possible and what's happening. And too many C-suites and boards do believe that, if you can be efficient, be affordable, if IT can keep everything running, keep us from being hacked, keep everything backed up, et cetera, pass our audit, that is the pinnacle. You're doing great, and you deserve your full annual bonus and 5 out of 5 on your performance score, et cetera, et cetera. There's more to it than that. There can be in most industries. I hesitate to say all, but we see just really opportunities that surprise our clients in many, many industries. Creating IT and data-driven products would change the company. This is kind of a psychological barrier to some. They don't want us to be a tech company. We're not. Our whole history, we've been a XYZ widget company, and there's resistance there. It doesn't necessarily change you. I think any company these days needs to be thinking about tech and digital capabilities, and they can remain a widget company. It's just the nature of the times. And on the flip side, there are many business executives that think, if they've survived the wave up to now, it's 2022. If they've survived it up to now, they probably will survive it. All the disruption is probably gone. Really, nothing can be further from the truth. So let me just share a few things here statistically to help you, and feel free to screenshot this or ask me for the recording later. I think this is a very powerful graph, it really showing logarithmically the continued growth of CPU power that's out there. Moore's law, as we know, been shockingly true. You follow this logarithmic path. I also point out here, not to say that CPUs are now equivalent to a human brain at all, but it's an interesting threshold we've crossed just this year, that CPUs that are mass produced now have more transistors than the brain has neurons. If we're comparing to synapses, we've got a long way to go, but we're going, and we will be there. The projection right now is by 2040 that CPUs will have as many transistors as humans have synapses in our brain. That may not even equate to, artificial general intelligence, as they say, the human equivalent, or super intelligence, the ASI level, where machines go far beyond what we could do, and you get into the Terminator sort of scenarios. There's a lot of complexity of what makes a brain work and the parallel capabilities, et cetera. But what we've seen now at least shows that these special purpose AI models are matching, in many ways surpassing, doing things really human brains can't even approach doing, with regards to, I've listed some examples here. You all are very familiar with this. We live with it every day. People often don't realize how much AI is already out there. And it's not just large companies doing it. It's become affordable because of this Moore's law curve, and cloud computing, I would say as well. It's now affordable for small and mid-sized companies. All right, the internet, certainly just as powerful as Moore's law, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but again, some graphics that might be powerful to sort of set the stage, and especially the stage that we are not done yet. If you look at, there's 5 out of 8 people on the globe have internet access now. That's irrespective of speed, right? All of that is improving, and we will fill this pie chart. There's no question, whether it's Starlink, whether it's just major initiatives in emerging markets. It's coming, and it will continue to change the world. And our comfort level, I would say, with e-commerce, with getting things online as opposed to human face-to-face interactions, walking into a store or what have you, is also growing. And you see that on the right. And then there's this huge question out there that could disrupt all of this and be just as big a change, frankly, as the internet has been. Depending on who you read, this is coming within 3 to 5 years, or it's 15 or 20 years away. But if your companies are expecting to be in business in 15 or 20 years, I hope most of them are in some form. And maybe you want to be on the winning side of that and be the companies that are acquiring your competitors and being leaders in your space. Think about the metaverse in 2022. It's not too early. Facebook didn't change its name to Meta for no reason. This is coming, and it is a question of, again, CPU power, storage, network latency, the advent of 5G and how that's spreading around the globe. All these things are leading this to be more and more possible, and we're still just figuring out how disruptive it might be. So just a few things on context there. So how do we think about innovation? Again, not to make it a commercial about Innovation Vista, but this is our framework. This is really a grouping of IT competencies that we have made to sort of paint in a picture the upstream and downstream relationship, first of all, between some of these. The what should you do first kind of question. We have clients sometimes come to us and want to start an AI model, and it's premature to do that if your email is crashing on a weekly or monthly basis. Right? If you're being hacked, if you just had a ransomware attack, it's not the time to think about predictive analytics. Right? You have some other fires to put out first. So it helps with sort of understanding that, but then it also helps think beyond efficiency, as in our terminology. Too many IT groups we see stop there. They stop at this stabilize and optimize level, and those are great in what they do. Performance gains, efficiency, IT performance, business performance, integrating data, a lot of powerful things. But if you're not monetized, if you haven't reached that level of digital transformation or digital business, and certainly if you haven't disrupted your industry, that's not always possible, but I will say monetizing IT usually is. And again, in surprising ways for a lot of our clients that don't expect us to find those opportunities, we usually do. And we usually find them with significant ROI, as we'll talk about here about the budget mindset. All right, so our main approach and distinctive approach on innovation capital, as opposed to lights on, is the power of separating the two. So the alternative is to run the risk that because you have great ideas and because you have projects that have good ROI, that from the outside looking in, your budget is increasing. It's sort of a blinders on kind of mentality that can develop. So we want to give you a way to think about year over year comparison. And we want to, those shops where, all right, do the same thing you did last year and we'll give you 2 or 3% for inflation. That's real. Frankly, it's fair. If apples are apples in 1 year to the next, I think it's fair for business executives to expect that. What we don't want to have happen is our innovative ideas being rolled into that numerator, and as a result of that, being shot down because you're growing too much, or turn into a trade-off where some of these foundational things in the pyramid don't get done because money is set aside for some innovative new thing. So they're separate, and we want to treat them as separate. And I will also say, not to steal thunder from future slides, but separating them also gets you that seat at the table to talk about innovative investments in the same context as your business leadership is thinking about other capital investments, like acquiring an adjacent competitor, or expanding into a new market, or investing in new equipment or plants, et cetera, et cetera. That's the mindset that we want them in when we're talking about innovation projects. All right, so how do we surface these ideas in the first place, right? If we're going to propose something, we need to have good ideas to begin with. So, I would say first, do your research. Too many times IT leaders sit down with business executives really with a clean sheet of paper, and it's great that we want to have these talks, right? So depending on the leader, that might still be okay, and they might appreciate your trying to find a way to move the needle for them. I'll tell you what they appreciate more. They appreciate more when you bring in multiple sheets of paper already completed by yourself and your team in research and preparation, and maybe some circled question marks and some, hey, am I thinking about this right? Do I have this grasp right? We think this might be impactful for you. What do you think? Do some research and treat it like, we're in the consulting business in my firm. Treat it like you're approaching a client as opposed to a colleague. And there's a lot of value in that mindset, and respecting their time, showing them that you're very serious. You don't want them to hand you their juicy, innovative idea on a platter so that you can turn and take credit for it. You are starting this, and you are bringing them something to start it with. And that can be internal. We call it intrapreneur interviews. It's a service actually that we offer, help coaching CIOs and advising them kind of behind the scenes for how to go about this in their organization. Not an entrepreneur, but an intrapreneur. And then there are industry benchmarks, competitor stats, and there's always the opportunity, especially now with so much digital business out there. You can secret shopper your competition. Go on their website. You can make your way pretty far down the list. You may even be able to make purchases depending on what they're selling and the budget of those items. See what they're doing. See what you like. See what you don't like. See where you think you could surpass them, and bring that to the business units. Then offer to dig into anything promising, right? So you're getting them as a sounding board, and you want to offer to take the ball and run with it after that conversation. This is critical. You don't want to pass it to them. You don't want to say, hey, would you mind having someone, kind of dedicated to me for XYZ? I want to, have them gather up some materials. I'm telling you, just psychologically, this needs to be your ball that you run with it. That also will help when you're trying to be the sponsor of these things, going in and having that seat at the table, that the business leader doesn't feel like, well, we did all the work, and IT comes in at the last and says, yeah, this is a great IT project, right? So this is an important aspect to really dig in. And, I'm not going to read every one of these bullets, but I think there are multiple avenues that are already well-traveled with digital transformation. I would offer, again, not seeking clientele on this webinar, I would offer to give you some ideas if you want to message me separately as a follow-up. Connect with me on LinkedIn or email me. I'm going to share my contact information at the end. And I would be happy to give you just some starting points there of questions to ask or avenues to explore. And then own the process. Again, in the same vein, after you've dug in, you want to flesh this out. You want to turn it into a proposal. Yes, get suggestions from them, because you want their head to be nodding. I'll talk in a second about problematic business units. So in some cases, we want their head to nod, or the CFO, and or sometimes it's great to have both. Sometimes you only have one, and sometimes that's enough. So depending on the dynamic in your organization, even if they're skeptical, ask them for some suggestions. Pick their brain, so to speak, but don't let that come across that you're asking them to carry the weight or their team to do the work. This needs to be a ball that you carry. Okay. So now sponsoring. So let's say you've done that work. You fleshed some things out. Let me give you some guidelines about really how to put this forward. So you collaborate with the business unit leaders and the CFO. This is critical. So as much as I say carry the ball, we are talking to the business unit and we're talking to the CFO, and we're doing that before we go to the CEO and the board. And again, we want either their one or the other or both of their heads to nod to say, actually, yeah, this makes sense. I do think the ROI is there. I think this is real. Your assumptions are not crazy. This is feasible, reachable, doable, and it's something that we should talk about as an executive team. You have to get to that level. If you're not at that level, like I say here, don't pitch, or maybe don't pitch yet. There are cases where a lot of this is cultural within an organization. If you have a very, let's call it old school mentality in executive leadership, and you can't get anyone's head to nod, there may be some winning of hearts and minds that you need to do. Maybe you need to do some smaller things before you execute the grand vision, things of that nature. So I'm certainly not putting this forth as a recipe for this will work for every organization, but I hope, generally some of this is valuable and thought-provoking for you. So you've got to get their head to nod. If you go into the boardroom and pitch this and you don't have their heads nodding, at least one of them before that session, you will get crushed. And just the skepticism, their embarrassment that you brought something in that they haven't already briefed the group on or gotten excited about or whatever, that alone will cause them to shut it down. So the way we navigate this is as important as the ideas that we bring. Now let's understand, we are competing in that boardroom with other investment options. I listed a few earlier, the acquisition of a competitor, the upgrade of a plant or equipment, expansion to brand new geographies, right? These are things that business leaders think about all the time that they want to do with their capital. And it depends. The right answer is it depends. Sometimes those things make sense, they do them. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they think they do and they go execute and then they fall short, right? This is business. That's the table that you now have a seat at. And you need to be aware of that. And you need to talk that language. Do not talk techie speak in that boardroom. Be mature about it. Tell them, we think this would surpass the return on invested capital that we see from our core business. We think it's better even than thinking about going to buy a competitor or expanding geographically. We think this is a potential home run. But even in the worst case scenario, which we've already vetted and heads are nodding about, it's at least a base hit. It's a good thing to do regardless. But hey, what if we hit that home run? That would be something, right? That's the level we get to. You'll know it when you see it, when you feel it. And I mean, it's incredibly exciting. These are the funnest things that we are involved in as a consulting firm. And I know that's true for you as a CIO, CTO, whatever role you're coming in from. It's just a fantastic thing to find these and to know walking into the room that you already have some heads nodding. Okay, so the comfort level in that boardroom from CEO, COO, CFO, head of marketing, CMO, the board of directors, your general counsel, they are used to business expansions, acquisitions, M&A landscape. They understand those things. They'll understand those potential uses of capital more and more quickly, more easily than they will something that is coming from IT, especially the very first time that you're in this kind of session and selling your innovation ideas in this kind of way and not in a separate IT session. I suggest here very strongly, get it in the side by side with the business capital uses, whether that's the quarterly board meeting, if there's some special meeting around this in the budget cycle, however that works in your organization, you want to get on the agenda for that session. And just be aware that your bar is higher. It just is. And I think it's valuable to know that going in. Hopefully it is, to just see, they need more. They're going to need more detail. They're going to need more backup around the worst case scenario. A lot of them at the table are going to immediately jump to that and say it's probably worst case scenario. Just be aware of that and be ready for that, and say, all right, and we'll have a base hit if that's what happens. I think there's potential for a home run. Our business unit here, maybe it's a double or a triple, but be ready. And then, like I said, be mature and understand that in that session, they're likely going to talk about some other things that you don't understand as well. And those other things may actually be better uses of the company's capital. And nothing better for your credibility on that team to have a business hat on and to say, I agree. Actually, I think we should acquire this competitor. We love this IT project, but with the money we have in the bank right now, that business idea is a better thing to do. It will do nothing but help your credibility to think that way rather than to continue to push because it's IT and you think you have to push, right? Don't do that. Get the wider scope and be a business leader at the table. All right. So just very quickly in summary, we believe that the best way to think about a year-over-year comparison is the lights on cost per employee. There is a fair question to be asked there. You want to answer it. And that's the calculation that we believe is right. Don't use the grand total, especially if you're growing. If you're shrinking, I'm not going to tell you not to. But the per employee metric is, I think it strikes people as fair. It's reasonable. They understand, we have to buy equipment, we have to buy licenses. They intuitively understand per employee that things are going to scale. So that's your apple and apple comparison. What you put in that numerator is critical. And there are certain things you might not want to put in, such as IT efficiencies. I'm going to counsel you to do that. The business in that boardroom session, the business is not going to be as open or appreciative of some sort of IT thing that, if we have this administrative tool that'll automate our DevOps, rollouts, and right now we have 3 people doing that, and one of them really wants to take this other open role. We think we could make this pivot and save money. All great. You need to do that within your apple and apple lights on budget. That's my suggestion. That's if it makes sense for you, you're the one reaping the reward. Take it on your own dime, so to speak. And then also this last bullet, separate the year over year for inflation versus something you're doing new, right? There are sometimes raised bars. Cyber is a great example. If you're not protected for something that you need to be, that falls under lights on, okay? But separate that as, okay, this portion and this percentage of our increase is because we're now going to have this cyber protection, intrusion detection, whatever it's going to be, that we didn't have before. And we feel like we're running an enormous risk. That thing, whatever it is, makes sense on its own. And that is why our per employee costs are going up. Then there's other parts of that increase that are, inflation is, I think I've said the word inflation in the last 2 months more than in the rest of my life. I was a very young man in the late 70s and 80s when we saw the horrible inflation. It's real. And I think your business leadership is expecting some portion of that to increase your budget every single year. All right. Then you pitch your innovation capital investments. You pitch them where and when they surpass the core business return on invested capital, and only then. And you have those heads nodding like we talked about. The ROI has been vetted. I think the more you can be cognizant and speak about the cost of capital of your organization, the ROIC of your core investment, could you just do more of the same? And is that a better thing than doing this IT thing, right? It's a fair question. Ask it, answer it, be ready to talk about why you think your innovation project is better or at least worthy of consideration by the group. And then, the MVP viable is the crux of that. MVP is thrown around a lot, and sometimes MVPs are so thin, they are not cohesive. They don't add value because they're only doing a portion of a process. And so a group has to, okay, let me jump into this MVP to do 1, 2, 3, and then I have to finish 4 through 7 over here in my existing system or spreadsheet or whatever it is that I have, and the efficiencies just disappear. So be careful that you size these correctly, and they're cohesive, but yes, as small as they possibly can be to minimize the risk and to be able to operate and build in an agile kind of mindset, proven far and away to be the most effective way to evolve technology in the enterprise. And then again, that base hit question, talk more about that honestly than the home run. The home run idea will sell itself. And if you have any to get excited, they'll begin to speak up and say, let's hit the ball over the fence because I think this will. You talk more about the base hit, and you're really speaking to those skeptics in the room. And then critical to nurture a culture of innovation and accountability. You don't want to ask for money and then have it appear to go into a black hole. And IT hired some people, they engaged some outside consultants and development firms, and they licensed some new thing, and we don't know. Is it turned on? I don't know. If it's not, when will it be? I don't know. I want to just give you the analogy. If you were acquiring a competitor, right, and that's the sort of thing you're competing against, think about the visibility and the status reporting and the just, uber focus, the priority level that would be for the organization to make that happen in a successful way. It'd be all over the place. And so, whether they ask you for it or not, I'm going to say send at least monthly, depending on the cadence and depending on the culture of your leadership and how many direct reports your CEO has, things like that, right? Don't spam them, but do send this to them and to the CFO as well. The more you can keep them on your side and make it clear that you are very appreciative of the trust they've given you with this capital investment. You're treating it as seriously as the COO would if they were acquiring another company, et cetera. Show them that, and then also to the board of directors. And you want to be the one to do that. Because the questions that come, likely you're going to be the only one who has those answers. But B, by showing them the nature in which you handle these kinds of projects, you are also increasing the chance the next time you go into that boardroom and you say, we believe it has this kind of bang for the buck and this kind of benefit and this level of risk, they'll believe you. They'll believe you more. Your credibility will increase. And you have to start somewhere. And I understand that. And the first time is obviously the most difficult. That's really where we get brought in to help more than anything. And then once you have that virtuous cycle going and you've done something or you've done a few things that are successful and you show them that you're accountable, you deliver the bad news when it's bad news. You don't let it get to the 11th hour and say, we were aiming for July, but I'm sorry, we're into August now and it's not ready yet. We're not rolled out. It probably rolled from July into August because of some scope creep or some resource issue or other priority that jumped to the top of the queue for part of the team in the interim. And that happened in April or May. Tell them in April or May when that happens that you think this is going to have an impact. And if you know what the impact is, share it with them then and tell them August and start saying August instead of July the minute you know that you should. All things, a lot of you, already have that kind of in your playbook, but hopefully this mindset is helpful. Some again, food for thought on the questions. So, okay, very, very fair question. So the bang for the buck, it is a delicate balance, right? So I am sort of saying two things. On the one hand, you want to carry the ball when you're vetting these project ideas. However, you may not have like enterprise reports on exactly the data that you need. What's an example? Let's say you're trying to build a capability that helps your agents win more deals, right? Real estate agents or brokerage agents or anything in that kind of sphere. If you don't have the data about deals they've pitched and lost, you're not going to know, and you're not going to know what percentage of those would technology have made a difference. Could you have shown them something that our competitors don't have? And for how many, what percentage or what type of customer profile would that move the needle, and maybe we win that deal as opposed to losing it, right? So it's a very fair question. It is a balance when you're gathering those benefits. And, I talked about heads nodding. You don't want to come up with something in isolation and just throw it on the presentation. It may be a swag. But it needs to be scientific and, at least as based in fact as it can be. And from a human nature perspective, if the business leader of that unit knows that their group has been part of coming up with these estimates, they're going to support them. Just human nature, right? If they haven't been involved at all, they won't. And so you don't want to foist this on them, but you want their input, right? So the entire time as you're engaging with the business unit, you want to be very respectful. You want to do all your homework. You want to come in with, all right, here's our understanding. We have these 5 things we want to just talk about and get your insights, because you know things we don't know, and we want this to make sense for you at the end of the day. Very fair. What about companies which have a hiring freeze? Okay, so also very fair question. The economy is stumbling a little bit right now, and it is very fair to say, there's some companies that are hunkering down, hiring freeze, layoffs, even to that level. So the whole invested capital, innovation capital topic assumes that you have capital. And I'm not saying that to be facetious, but just, follow my train of thought. So if you do, and you think that, maybe there's an opportunity, maybe there is that boardroom discussion of what should we do with our capital. You have a new investor, you have retained earnings, whatever it is. That's when you have an opportunity for something like this. When you don't have that, when you're losing money or you don't have enough cushion for investments like this, it's just not the right time, probably. And I think it's okay to talk about, the CFO, CEO, surface those ideas, right? You still want to be, kind of an entrepreneur. You want to be thinking this way. And, economic cycles swing. They go in both directions, and they seem to turn the corner more quickly than they used to in the past. So I think if you're ready with a stack of fantastic ideas of, hey, when we want to scale this thing again, or when the time is right for this new market, and either we have the capital, well, certainly we have the capital to invest to make it happen, and our customers will also be in a position where they're ready to play offense, and they may be ready for an upgraded service, which includes an AI agent that helps them, navigate our services or products, or proactively suggest to them how to maintain their inventory of things, et cetera, et cetera. If the customers are going to have an appetite for it, and your organization is ready with capital to potentially build it, that's when it makes sense. again, every industry, every group is different. So hard for me to answer. Happy to talk with you or anyone after about, specific situation. And, I'm happy to just give you my thoughts off the cuff on how I would approach it. But I think the overall thing I would say is show the C-suite and the board that you're a business leader first. That's cliche. So it's said so many times, but what that really means when the rubber meets the road is that sometimes you shut down IT project ideas because it's not the right time. And you just say, I have some things, we're working on it. I'm not going to bring it. We're going to wait for this market to turn, et cetera. When the time is right, we're very excited to talk about this, but the time is not right. So we won't now. That kind of thing will help your credibility. And again, it's just better for you in general if you're seen as a partner who happens to have a ton of IT expertise and innovative ideas and whatever, as opposed to the uber advocate for all things IT. And I hope you understand the difference there in what I'm describing. Great questions. Any others while we're wrapping up here? We're almost right exactly at time. Okay, so again, I want to open the door. I'm happy. There's no obligation on this. We do run a consulting firm that offers these services, so it's a little bit of, I'm walking the line here with explaining this, but we want these webinars to add value to you, even if you're not a client of Innovation Vista. That's the bottom line. So if I've left something unanswered, or if this has prompted a question in your mind that you say, okay, but ... I am happy to close that loop with you, and no charge, no obligation, and so follow up with me. Let me know what those things are and how I can help. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best of luck with your budgeting cycle. The times are a little bit tough. It's you have to have your head in the sand not to know that. But I think for some organizations, that means it's the perfect time to play some offense. And if there's going to be a shakeup, let's see if your organization can be at the top of the heap at the end of it. Thank you again for joining this, and look for more. We're doing these on a regular basis, so look for more webinars coming in the future from Innovation Vista. Thank you again.